angel of death watches over a village graveyard. The dead are supposed to rest in peace, but not tonight. New England, in the 1830s. A group of townspeople are on a mission to the local cemetery. They are searching for a restless spirit, a spirit they believe is a vampire. The blood-sucking vampire is assumed to be a European creation. But in a remarkable series of discoveries, scholars now believe scenes like this once happened in America. Records reveal dozens of cases where people actually dug up the bodies of their relatives, believing that they were vampires.
Folk vampires in New England are really the farmer's daughter. They're peasants, they're ordinary people, they're members of your own family, which in a sense makes them more frightening.
Now, the first hard proof of a vampire tradition in America, and the scientific explanation for these gruesome tales. For more than a century, the story of New England vampires lies buried beneath the dirt of a gravel pit in eastern Connecticut. Kids playing near a gravel mine dislodge a human skull. The state police arrive and cordon off the area.
The bones finally found over here. Looks like there's something right here.
But this skull is not from a recent crime scene. It is more than 100 years old. State archaeologist Nick Bellantoni leads the team investigating the site. They halt the gravel mining and begin their own excavation, suspecting a graveyard is hidden under the sand.
26 feet right here.
Okay, let's take it up to 35.
35?
The archaeologists begin to dig. They uncover the graves of 27 people, ranging in age from 6 months to 70 years. Each skeleton is aligned with its head towards the west. The alignment of the bones confirms that they have found a lost Christian burial ground. At first, there's not a single hint of something unusual. But then, the team hits burial number 4.
I got it. Excellent. Just continue this way. Just continue.
On the shreds of the coffin lid, the archaeologists will find the letters JB, the deceased's initials. This was a typical 19th century practice. But what the archaeologists see in JB's tomb is anything but typical.
I don't know what's going on here.
Well, that's not the way people are normally buried.
In a normal New England burial, a skeleton would be laid straight out. But this skeleton has been rearranged to form a skull and crossbones. After JB's death, someone opened his grave and deliberately disturbed his bones. Bellantoni has excavated more than 100 New England burial sites, but he has never seen anything like this. To unravel the mystery, he will need the help of a forensic specialist. Bellantoni sends JB's bones to Paul Sledzik, curator of the National Museum of Health and Medicine.
There are a few things that we can tell from JB's skull. These protuberances over the eyes are typical of males. Large mastoid processes you see here, which is the protuberance behind your ear that you can feel. Those are larger in males. JB also had some pathological conditions. We see here that he was missing these teeth before he died, so when he smiled he had a large gap there. These are some vertebrae from JB's back. These are lower or lumbar vertebrae, and we can tell by looking at this lipping here that we see that he suffered from osteoarthritis in his spine, so he had some back problems during his life as well.
A picture of JB is emerging. His bones reveal a grueling life, filled with harsh physical labor. The scientists believe JB died at age 55, and that he was born shortly before the American Revolution, a time when most of New England was farmland.
JB was a hard New England farmer. Probably had a family and kids of his own. He's not a peculiar character. It's after death that he becomes interesting, in that people thought he was mischievous and coming back from the grave.
Bellantoni has heard the folk tales about New England vampires. JB's bones may be the very first physical proof that those stories are true. In places like Cumberland, Rhode Island, folklore expert Michael Bell combs the archives, looking for written evidence of New England's vampire tradition. So far, he's uncovered many accounts of graves that, like JB's, were disturbed after death.
I think what we have is the tip of the iceberg. So if we have, let's say, 18 or 19 cases, that represents probably a small number of those that were actually undertaken.
Cumberland, 1796. Woodstock Green, 1829. Jewett City, 1854. Bell has examined the details in each case of New England's suspected vampires. He's found a pattern. It begins at town council meetings, where families plead to dig up the bodies of their loved ones. With the full knowledge and permission of town officials, a family enters a graveyard. An epidemic is coursing through their home. Many are hovering on the edge of death. They suspect the disease is the work of a vampire, a restless soul who leaves the grave each night to suck the life from the living.
They would have to go to the cemetery and exhume the bodies of the family members who had died to find out which one was the right one, which one was a little different. You have people in your family that you love. They're dying. If you don't do something, other people are going to die in your family and then people in the community. It must be the end of the line, the only last hope, the last chance. And that's what it was, I think, for all of these families.
The family lifts up a casket that not long ago they nailed shut. They are looking for signs of a vampire. Remarkably, they will see a body that looks alive. But in fact, it's just the natural process of human decomposition.
There is some forensic evidence that helps us interpret what we're seeing in both the European folklore and the New England folklore.
After death, fingernails don't grow. But as this forensic photograph reveals, the nails appear longer because the tissues underneath dry and recede.
Same with the hair. As the tissues in the face dry, the hair appears as though it's grown. So those various aspects can be explained very easily by looking at aspects of human decomposition.
To the family, these signs mean they have found a vampire. they cut into the deceased's chest. They remove the heart, lungs, and liver, and burn them on a fire. Now, 100 years after the last vampire incident in New England, Bell thinks he knows what ties all these cases together. Bell has discovered that in each case of suspected vampires, every single one died of the same disease.
What links all of the so-called vampires or vampire stories together is that they all died of tuberculosis or consumption. And most of them died too young.
Before the Civil War, tuberculosis is the #1 cause of death in New England. The disease moves mysteriously from town to town, family to family. At the time, no one knows that an airborne germ causes tuberculosis. No one knows how to cure the disease. They only know its deadly symptoms.
Your lungs are rotting away. You can't produce enough oxygen. You can't keep your body fed, and you waste away, literally. You get weaker and weaker, paler and paler. You cough a lot. You're coughing up blood, parts of your lung, and you may have blood at the corners of your mouth. And so the symptoms of dying from consumption really coincide with our ideas of what happens to a person that's been attacked by a vampire.
According to Bell, tuberculosis even explains the most gruesome aspect of the vampire belief. Here in the cemetery, after burning the organs, families would actually consume the ashes of the infected flesh. It was a desperate attempt to ward off death.
In folk terms, it's the hair of the dog that bit you. Like cures like. And so, to me, it's not that far removed from the logic of inoculation.
But is this what happened to J.B.? Does tuberculosis explain why J.B. was singled out? Paul Sledzik puts the theory to the test. If he finds evidence of tuberculosis, this would be the first physical proof linking the vampire stories to the disease.
Well, during the process of analyzing J.B.'s skeleton, we look at all the surfaces of all the bones. And these are the upper left ribs here. If you look on the internal surface, this white plaque, this white reactive bone here, and we can see that in the adjacent ribs as well, is very distinctive of tuberculosis.
When Paul Slezzik's report came back, and when J.B. was shown to have had tuberculosis, everything fit perfectly for us, that we were now able to explain what we saw in the archaeological record in terms of a vampire folk belief of southern New England.
Bellantoni believes that J.B.'s family thought he was spreading tuberculosis from beyond the grave. So they opened his coffin, intending to burn his organs and consume the ashes. But in a twist, they found that J.B. was already a skeleton. So to stop J.B. from leaving his grave, the family crossed his leg bones. One way or the other, the vampire J.B. would be stopped.
And they thought that J.B. was still undead, and as a result, coming out of his grave, feeding on living family members, spreading the disease. And these were desperate people who were now in a position to try to save the living. And when all other answers failed, maybe a spiritual answer was the one, they went back into J.B.'s grave and they found a way to put him to rest.
In both America and Europe, scientists have discovered that deadly epidemics triggered a surge in vampire incidents. In Europe, it was the plague. In America, tuberculosis. At a time in history when medicine had no answers for what caused death, reasonable people searched for another explanation. They created the vampire, the creature that spread death from beyond the grave.